Hello and welcome back. I'm Colton with Still Rhythm Guidance. We are continuing where we left off, speaking on the Brahma Viharas, these infinite mental states of consciousness, infinite abodes, divine abidings as they are translated. We can talk about that exact translation a little bit later. As these Brahma Viharas, infinite abodes, are explained by the Buddha in the Mettasahagata Sutta of the Samyutta Nikaya, known as the Vasana Sutta, as is quoted by Buddhaghosa in the Visuddhimagga. We left off at altruistic joy, or mudita. This is a very confusing one for a lot of people, and we need to get into why. So it is often translated as sympathetic joy, which is just kind of like sympathy. How do you sympathize? And like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to feel good for what everybody else has, but I don't because I want it to. And we have to totally supersede that entire mental sphere by the time we're dealing with altruistic joy. Altruistic joy, I believe, is a much better description, and we're going to get into that. So first of all, feeling joy for others, the how and the why are wakeful, conscious mind state immediately believes joy for others for all these things, what they have. That's pleasures that don't last. Why would you be happy for something that someone will lose at some point and then suffer over? That's stupid happiness for other people. And that's what the Buddha would call very unwise. You're not seeing it clearly. You're not looking to the end of the line. Altruistic joy because you got a new job. Like, we like to think like that's, that would be joy, right? And it's like, no, because what if our friend loses that job? Just stay with compassion. Just stay with compassion at that point. We're not, joy for others doesn't come from mundane worldly things. The one place that true altruistic joy comes from is the liberation of the hearts and minds of other people through this kind of wisdom, so that they can be free of their suffering by realizing these things, by deepening their own heart. That's what we feel joy for others for. That's what altruistic joy is. That's what mudita is all about. So it's kind of limited, really. I mean, there's like the world. We talked a lot about hypnagogic state of samadhi, state of samatha in the last episode on this topic, and that very much applies. You might want to do a little bit of a refresher there. In that, when we're in the dream state, when we're, coming out of a waking nightmare, and we realize our sort of, equanimity to these things, that our consciousness, uncolored by views, perceptions, all these things are spoken about in great detail by the Buddha. If you're unfamiliar, again, like and subscribe. We're getting into all of these faculties. There's so many different aspects of this practice that aid in the others. Right now we're talking about this one. So these views of the world arise with a conscious mind, a mind that dualizes, a mind that polarizes. We polarize through craving. I like this, I don't like that. Because I don't like this, I don't want it around. Now I'm resisting it, I'm pushing away. Now I'm killing the children of my enemy because they won't go away and they bring my pain with them. And you're just drinking pain by allowing your mind to go unoversighted and do these things. We got to investigate all of these things. That's why in the 7 Factors of Enlightenment, we become mindful and then we investigate. We get clear, we calm ourselves down. Samatha is absolutely required for the state of mindfulness, and then vipassana, insight, takes place. We investigate. Well, we investigate and energy arises so that we can continue our investigation, and that makes us feel good so that we sustain our energy and we get tranquil, and then we get concentrated, and then we arrive at equanimity, which is the actual vipassana, is the actual insight. Once we've seen the way things work completely and totally, then we get equanimous. We let go. We realize this is a broken toy. I'm not even going to interact with that. Just the way, preferences. The mind is dual. It has a preference, and right there, if we're not mindful in everything we do, if we're not reserved in everything we do, our mind is going to do this, and we think we're the big king out there running around, I have my stuff. Even if you don't lose it in this life, you're a fool, because you're not recognizing your mind has been hoodwinked by these things. And the way, the functioning of your whole psychology, your whole mentality, your whole emotional complex is just, you can be moved around like a chess piece on a board. And major corporations, they're aware of all this ancient wisdom, governments and I don't know. There are forces at work that are partially aware of these things, and they take advantage of them, which is really sick, because they are also in their intellect part. Greed can drive you to do very evil things. The Buddha spoke about this. He said, you can use my teaching for evil. You can use it to manipulate other people, and I beg you not to do that, because that's really gonna, and again, back to the, future lives, or if this is your one life. If this is your one life, then you've lived in shadow and confusion. You haven't seen all there is to see in this world. By acting in that way, you're just assailing your mind with confusion, with knots that don't make sense, and now you're going to have cancer, you're going to have diabetes, your body's going to twist up on itself, because in your subconscious mind, these things don't make sense, but you're doing them for reasons that don't actually give you nearly as much pleasure as being in balance with yourself. And these are the things, this is what awakening is, or enlightenment is making these things conscious in our mind, recognizing these things, because our subconscious knows it. Our subconscious knows having things doesn't feel nearly as good as being whole in your heart. But if we don't know these things consciously, then we're gonna become, the drug addict of worldly sensual pleasure, of possession and gain. And, when we gain, we experience loss. When we have pleasure, we can experience pain, or we do experience pain. Duality. If we have a dualistic mind, then dualistic things are gonna just smack us around. And that's how most of us feel in this world, is smacked around. So it's not so much of letting go of the whole world. I don't care about the whole world. No, not at all. It's recognizing it, looking at it closely, and breathing through the trauma and the pain of this is how the world is, until you get the investigation to cycle through and we start seeing these things. And altruistic joy is a deep, abiding joy when other people can have those insights. That's altruistic joy, is when someone else has a wisdom that makes them, that liberates them, that frees them from their own mental prison, and also just makes them a really beautiful, awesome person. Because when we live in this sort of way and look at things in this sort of way, we're not, crummy people anymore. We can all be really crummy. I've been such a horrible person at times in my life, and I look back, I just, we have to have compassion. We have to, shame and guilt, these experiences, we can hate ourselves our whole lives, and we can never get rid of them. They're so wrapped up in there. And to soften up that sort of muscle tissue of the heart, to loosen that up, takes these investigations, why did I do this? Why was I this? And investigating all the way through all of these systems of cognizance, all of these mental constructs, all of these truths, to see, our motivations and things. When we see them clear, our external search for pleasure that is so hard to achieve from the world, and then when we do, it's gone the next day. It's actually gone the moment that our five senses are distracted from the experience. We don't notice that because we're not really practicing mindfulness. We want to have mindfulness in everything that we do, and that sounds so overwhelming. It's like, how am I gonna, I can barely sit for 20 minutes. Like, we don't focus on mindfulness. We focus on calm abiding. We focus on samatha. We focus on neutralizing the limbic system, neutralizing the nervous system in calming. And again, this is why all meditation teachers, we say, sit down, get present with where you are, because your brain isn't connecting with all these other thoughts. Just be right here. Now just relax. Relax your shoulders, relax your face. Breathe in, make sure there's no traces of emotion, right here, or right here, or here. Loosen all this, let your jaw hang. And practice this over and over and over again, because it is the prerequisite for everything that comes afterwards. And when we get good at this, this is where our joy comes from. So much easier than finding it externally, and we can notice that because that makes us mindful, so that we can watch as we experience joy, experience it, and don't be mindful like, oh, I should turn away from pleasure. No, just do it. Just notice that it's like, it's a junk pleasure, like, okay, my body feels pleasurable right now. My heart doesn't. My heart doesn't really care about this or that. My heart cares about its own liberation, and that feels so much better than all this other, junk. We don't notice until we're mindful. And that calmness allows us to calmly move through our entire day, like kind of mindful, kind of present. And that gets deeper and stronger. That gets deeper and stronger to where it's like we want to. If you don't want to be on your meditation cushion, then, I'm sorry, I don't want to, you're doing it wrong. It's okay. I've done it wrong for years, and you don't have to. The reason you don't have to is knowledge. You got to have the knowledge. You got to have the right knowledge. And then we realize, oh, okay, yeah. I need to stop trying to get somewhere with it. I need to get good at this part first, the calm. But it does. It helps to realize, what calm does, and how to get the calm. Ajahn Anan gives such a beautiful description of samadhi in his book, Sotapanna Magga, the path of the Sotapanna, or the path of the stream enterer. He says, this is so great, he says, with mindfulness firmly established within the sphere of our body, our restless thinking and conjuring diminish, and basically we find ourselves in just like this really beautiful calm state. And he says, this is samadhi. Boom! 300 pages of the Visuddhimagga are rendered useless. Because this brilliant monk in his way of, but there's so much packed into what he's saying that if we're not aware, when we firmly establish mindfulness within the sphere of our bodies and we're focusing on our body, the conditioned thoughts that we have, they sort of dissipate. Now, if we're holding on to those thoughts, that's what makes it hard to just be in the body. We don't realize that thought complex, it arose, it's gonna vanish. Impermanence of everything is such an important thing to direct mindfulness towards. Notice, when I'm at my worst, when I am just, I'm hopeless in life, or I'm ashamed, or I feel worthless, or, these things, it takes a while for the heart to get strong enough to actually keep looking at that, because it feels like torture, but do it, because you're going to notice its impermanence, and you're not going to notice its impermanence unless you develop the stability of heart and mind to give it attention, to bear with it, to be with it in a friendly, kind manner with this human nobility. Be present with these things. When you are present, you'll notice that they're impermanent. You'll notice, you're in the middle of like this lamentation of like how, horrible your life is. And you're like, do I smell cookies? your brain is going to be like, oh, I want a cookie. But you're like, huh? Kind of distracted. Now, if you're mindful in that moment, you're going to realize, so everything else in here does not take my sorrow nearly as seriously as I am. But we are reinitiating that seriousness by those ruminating thoughts. Papancha is the term in Pali which the Buddha talks extensively on papancha, because this is how the conditional nature of these things keeps reconditioning itself for re-arisal tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. We're just not going to notice these things if we're not developing samatha, calm abiding, an ability to just bear with our experience in grace, in some decency, very natural, just human tendencies and characteristics. The Buddha says in the Metta Sutta, just as a mother cares for her child, her only child, so too with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. These are just very natural things. And if you didn't have a mother, or if you had a horrible mother, then that's of course a huge topic that I don't want to minimize that for anyone out there. And maybe you don't even have friends or loved ones who are, deep-hearted. So you really have to find that in yourself. You do. And you can kind of bend just your own emotional feeling in however it shows up in that moment to yourself, to be able to work through these things, to find that natural humanness in you, that natural goodness. Most of the time, monks, the Buddha himself, people really on this path, I've said this for so many years, on one level within our own mind we're alone. We're completely and totally, utterly alone. Parts of it we are, intimately, deeply alone, and we're never gonna describe or share our experience with others. We're not at all alone, because everyone is going through this experience of being human. People we do like, people we don't like, people we love too, and that's just directing attention to that. Compassion opens up for another's experience, and it pulls us out of our own. But also, we don't feel isolated when we recognize, when we direct our mindfulness and our attention to that fact. We recognize, the nature of being human, that everyone else is going through it. But also, on a whole nother level, we are going through that alone within our own hearts. So we have to, it's not that we have to, it's that we're the only one who can be there truly for ourselves in it. No one's going to replace us. And it's just a simple practice of just being present with it. And again, coming into I just love this word, the hypnagogic state, a state right in between subconscious and conscious. Literally, the best times to practice are, right after you've woken up and as you're falling asleep or getting tired, because there's a subduedness to you that's natural and happens twice a day, like where you just kind of stop caring about stuff because you need to go to sleep. And touching into that energy and being able to bring it into our world, it's the nature of our mind to be able to calm its reactivity. So bringing this energy to bear on, our heart and our aloneness as we go through this thing called life, as we experience suffering and compassion and self-compassion and all these things. So this altruistic joy, this state mudita, I want to try and get a little clearer about these things. I've been grazing on a lot of topics because it takes this really massive framework. This is a what's the term? It's an ancient discipline, an ancient wisdom discipline. The disciplines, these disciplines, whatever culture they stem from, they're the culmination of human wisdom. So they're pretty deep. There's a lot of functioning parts. So it's hard to get really clear about one thing when it has so much to do with so many other factors of what it is we're doing with these practices. So if up to this point, I guess anybody who's had a hard time with it probably stopped watching. But if you have continued to stay with me, please stay with me more. Keep watching other videos. It does get a lot clearer, but it does take a lot of effort. So I'm going to try and be a little clearer about what we're talking about here. So altruistic joy. We can have a joy. We can be joyful for others, for their gain or their not gain. Here we're going to diverge again to something the Buddha often talked about as the four worldly winds of gain and loss, of fame and disrepute, of pleasure and pain. So things that are tied to the world, a wise person, a noble person who is our friend, who cares about us, isn't really gonna relish in, the fact that we got a new job or that dream job or that new car, because they're going to be the voice of wisdom in our lives that says, be careful, it might not last, you might get fired, so don't love it too much. And it's not that, that mom, or that grandma, like, make sure you, do your chores and wash your face and, don't leave the light on, or, don't, did you leave the car light on in your car again, honey? And because it's gonna be dead tomorrow morning. That is the nature, and that's kind of like this old lady wisdom that they're doing it from a place of love. It just doesn't sound like it to us. It sounds oppressive. I'm like, yes, okay, I'm doing everything perfectly. It's not about that. We never will, and that's the point. Is we have to constantly tend to this mundane physical world, especially if we want to derive our pleasure from it. This is key in all of meditative practice, is that look closely at how much effort you put in to getting pleasure from external things when it's so easy. And you might be saying, yeah, right, it's easy. No, it's not easy to get it from your meditation practice. If it's not, there's something amiss, and that's okay. Start back at ground zero. Again, this is another offshoot. This is why humility is such a major factor of all spiritual paths, of all wisdom teachings, is this humility, because you are digesting a broad base of knowledge. And so to get, you need that whole base of knowledge for your meditation practice to be a much easier way of feeling real freedom and real joy and real connection with your life, so much more than that stupid car, that lousy job, or whatever. Even like dream marriage, even being happy for, and these practices come down to existential things that may seem to us like, well, that's a little overboard. You're going a little far there, man. We're like, dream marriage. Okay, you find the love of your life, you're probably going to get divorced, or it could go bad, or you never know what's going to happen. Don't hold on too much, and even if everything does go well, one of you is going to die before the other, and that's going to be horrible on you. It's going to be really painful. This is the nature of life. It's not to say don't love people. It's not to say don't hold on to them or care about them. It's to say have a higher state of consciousness, have a higher mind and a bigger heart. Have a heart that can marry a woman and know she's gonna die and love her every day of her life. And also know that if she really loves you, she doesn't want you to suffer. So become the kind of human being who can hold the nature of your whole life in this beautiful peace, this equanimity, this heartfelt humanity. And don't poison your love by saying you are the aspect of my happiness, and if you don't live up to that, I'm going to punish you or suffer and then make you feel bad for my suffering. Because so you might say, you know, that's really drastic to not be, you know, have altruistic joy, you know, for our friends when they get married or whatnot. And I'm not saying, you know, don't be happy for them. Just, you know, it's just not altruistic joy. It's not a Brahma Vihara. It's not an infinite mind state because it's not based on existential principles. It doesn't have a place here. It's worldly joy. Be happy. Be happy. Have joy for your friends at their weddings. Have joy when they get a new job. But for you and yourself, know that these worldly things, they come and they go. And they're so unstable. They often do and definitely always can end in their opposite of joy, which is pain. So altruistic joy, it's a lot more limited than we think, but it's so much deeper of a joy for those that we love because it is exactly what we're talking about. It's this knowledge. When someone has this knowledge and you see it in them, when you see that release in their heart, when they're no longer getting their pleasure outside, when they're totally free and liberated inside themselves. I'm not talking about full-blown enlightenment. I'm talking about vipassana, insight, awakening, liberating the heart, wisdom, the growth of wisdom. That is something that you really, like, you totally celebrate in somebody else. And you won't if they have it and you don't have it. This is a dynamic that is only in that dualistic mind. I've been saying the conscious mind, but what I mean is the waking state mind, the mind that's right here in its physical world, that's not remembering that there's someone else back here that can look at the physical world and not take it so seriously, see it for how it functions, see it in its detail, and also see the whole inner world too. The subconscious mind, the mutability or the alterability of our perceptions. A big part of the sutta in topic is in practicing these 7 factors of enlightenment. I also noticed I haven't actually just said them all in order. Mindfulness, investigation, energy, rapture or pleasure, tranquility, samadhi or concentration, and then equanimity. This is the system. One grows out of the other. You can read the teaching of mindfulness of breathing, Anapanasati Sutta, the Majjhima Nikaya. This is the way the Buddha describes from mindfulness comes investigation, from investigation comes energy, from energy comes pleasure, etc., etc., etc. In the sutta, as he's talking through those, he's saying you color each one of these with the Brahma Viharas. And then he does something which I want to bring back to this about, you know, the conscious state, the wakeful state, is the Buddha often instructed to, and people, this gets a really bad connotation because people are always like, oh no, you're destroying my pleasure, you know, by, ooh, that's unhealthy, you know, in the mind to do that to yourself. And it's like, no, it's not, is to see the repulsive in the unrepulsive. To see what's not repulsive in something that actually you do find repulsive. And then to see both in either. And the only reason for this is a mental training. It's a mental training. It's the practice of altering your perception of something. And as we do this, we see, oh, you know, look at the terrible parts of that job. You know, if you go for that job interview and you don't get it, you're going to feel sad and like you're not good enough and yada yada. But if before you go to that interview, you say, you know, what are the bad parts of that job? Well, I'm not making $10 million an hour like some people in this world. I'm not sitting around doing nothing. So comparatively, that job is no good, right? Or, well, you know, my real dream job is to, you know, own a company like that. So, you know, it's not so great, is it? It's a stepping stone from now. And an infinite universe has forking paths where you can get to where you're going anyways. If you pin all your hopes on one thing and say my happiness and my pleasure and my everything is dependent on just this, you're going to suffer if you don't get it. But if you go in beforehand and you say, it's not the best thing in the world, go into everything seeing the duality, not hankering to just one side of the duality. See the good and the bad of all things. Then you're going to go in there and you're going to have this energy of it's okay, and they're going to read it as, wow, this person doesn't really care if they get this job or not, because they've got something going on in them, and they're going to sense that. Be like, wow, this person isn't needy, because that's the last thing a boss wants to see, right? Oh, this person's so desperate. Yuck. If you come in and you're already like at ease in yourself, that's what we're really talking about. Equanimous. Then it's going to go better for you anyways. And then if you don't get the job, you will have already been in a place where you could take it or leave it. That's the point of the Buddha instructing his monks, his disciples in this way, is when we start to play with this function of our cognition. This is wonderful. He does this with sexuality, which can get really taboo. But let's face it, craving for, a significant other or intimacy with people can drive us into real states of sorrow. It can drive us into a lot of loneliness, and it can cause, a huge amount of jealousy. Now, of course, if you're a monk ordained under the Buddha, this is off limits anyways, and because the purpose of doing this is to ascend to a higher state of mind anyways, where these desires, they become, they run off to the sidelines. They don't have this glory that they have for the quote-unquote uninitiated. Anyways, the Buddha says, take a beautiful woman and think about her teeth. Think about the plaque on her teeth. Think about the smell in her mouth. Think about all the foul parts after that. I mean, urine, blood, feces, hair, dead skin. He initially says, think about skin, nails, teeth, head hair, eyelashes, and body hairs all over. Just think about all these various parts, and then you can zoom in, and that really helps with like modern science. Zoom into the bacteria that is everywhere on our bodies. Just see that it's an illusion, Human beauty is based on harmonic proportions that are found in nature, and it is, undeniably beautiful, but it's a beauty that is physical, limited, and elusive. It can be seen in two different ways. If that is beneficial, which it is, because there would be zero rape and murder in our world if people were trained this way, then yes, there's benefit to seeing, to taming our addictive hunger, our wild, uncontrolled urges. And sexuality is always going to be sort of the pinnacle of those desires, those hungers in the heart, so to speak. We want to extinguish, tame these things, calm them down. So this practice is for the purpose of seeing that our desires, that's our desire. Another person could desire someone of the opposite sex. That's a function of cognition. To want or not want someone, to find a certain person attractive or not, to want a certain job or not, to enjoy a flavor or find it kind of disgusting, to love a certain kind of food or see that it's kind of gross. All food in general is, a bunch of living things that were smushed and ground and cut up, and, whether it's meat or vegetables or plants, it's like the stuff of the world, all jammed up together. When we really bring our attention to this, we have the faculty of our consciousness to perceive of these things in a way that destroys our addictions and frees us. That's the one and only point of this. And then once we are free of external pleasure seeking, once we stabilize a meditation practice, and we learn the tools to sedating the limbic system, to, as information comes into our mind, activates that limbic system, our emotions and our desires, we can, with mindfulness, with presence, with this connection to our reality where we're not turning away, watch the intake, decide whether it's good or bad based on intellectual knowledge and understanding, not based on it tastes good or I want it, so I'm going to do whatever I need to have it, including suffer and destroy my own life because I'm not being fully aware on all of my different layers and levels. This is where a hypnagogic state, a state of samadhi, a state of being in touch with our subconscious desires, views, perceptions, beliefs. When we're in touch with both, there's the outside world, the awake world, there's everything that influences how we relate to it, and all that becomes not fixed, not solid. You can walk out of your front door tomorrow morning and think, I'm on top of the world, I can do anything, based only on your beliefs. And that will color the world happy, that will color the world whatever. It can be colored sad or depressed. The more joyous means the more freedom. It means the more possibilities that you have accessed and opened up to in your life. The Buddha promises us that when we lose our illusions about all these things, that we become utterly solid within ourselves. There's absolute peace, there's absolute joy, there's absolute freedom when we fully get to know, when we auger down into the essence of true wisdom. We see we usurp control over ourselves completely. We're in the operating system of right here, pineal gland, pituitary gland, all the wild experiences that you know are available but that you're cut off to. It's all because of this stuff. It's all because of this stuff. Altruistic joy is a huge, profound human joy for someone else attaining to this mantle of personal, supreme, spiritual power. What other way do we have to say it? To be able to initiate these experiences, to have clarity, to have the kind of clarity that frees us from this trap sort of suffering that we experience in the realm of samsara, the realm of the physical, the realm of incarnate consciousness. The spiritual realm is the mental realm, is the realm of the heart and emotions. It's the realm of consciousness behind the senses, what's going on in here. We can control it. We have influence there. We can affect the conditions there. Contact with the outside world conditions us if we're not conditioning how contact is dealt with in here, which is how we relate to it, which is why we must not turn away, which is why we must give careful attention or mindfulness to our experiences and do so in a balanced way. And this is what altruistic joy is for, is when this is achieved. This is a mighty achievement, and it is one that gives people a deep, abiding freedom. For this purpose, it is related by the Buddha to the accessing of the sphere of infinite consciousness. We see that our consciousness now is infinite, because there's an infinite variety of ways in which we can perceive of things. And when we emotionally, we get into our limbic system, we learn the processes of calming ourselves enough to shift our perception and see how shiftable our perceptions are in general anyways, how they change without our say-so. We start to see the base of infinite consciousness. We start to enter a state of consciousness that is aware of just how infinite our consciousness really is. And that, of course, equates to everyone else that we've ever met. Consciousness, the faculty of consciousness in general, has the ability to see infinite variety. So these are this hierarchy of states that the four Brahma Viharas, the Buddha is attributing them, aligning them to these higher jhanic states, these higher states of absorption in our practice, deeper states of consciousness. So we grazed on this earlier. We're going to go through them. Metta, when you have this warm-heartedness in our practice, he says it provides a beautiful outlook on life. We get in touch with the essence of what is beautiful, is sort of how it's quoted. Compassion brings us to the base of infinite space. A compassionate heart, this emotional faculty, allows us to open all the way. If we can't function and perceive from a place of compassion, then our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, our limbic system, our emotions, our fears are going to shut us down before we can even be aware of the infinity of space. A human being actually has the ability to be viscerally aware of these things, but not until you get through your vulnerability to the experience of cognizantly, intelligently being aware of the experience of other humans, of other living creatures, which is suffering, which constitutes to understand fully them and those and what they are going through. The emotional title for that is compassion. To understand is to have compassion. You can understand analytically. You cannot understand analytically and emotionally without it being compassion. It's a feeling that you get in your body. These are really potent. So loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, equanimity. Let's put loving kindness, compassion over here. These two are calming. These two are energizing. Warm-heartedness, energy arises. Compassion, this is a lot of energy. But let's look at the other two and what their function is in relation to these two. Altruistic joy says that, okay, so all the suffering in the world, but what happened to Jesus? He was nailed to a cross. He was disemboweled in front of his own mother. And what did he say? Forgive them. They know not what they do. I want to die like that. That's what I aspire to. I don't want to have millions of dollars. I want to be a strong enough person to be that ironclad, to be that free. That's beauty, if I've ever heard of it. There are stories like that in the suttas, in the Nikayas, beautiful stories, just as beautiful, of some of the monks. This heart that knows I don't have to be influenced by my outside world. I can have freedom in here. So altruistic joy, it looks at this compassion and it says, if you would rise to the mantle of wisdom, you wouldn't have that sorrow. So compassion is active, but it's only active in teaching. It's only active in trying to impart the wisdom that we have gained. Otherwise, we lament. If we don't have that wisdom and if we don't see the escape from this, if we don't see how we can heal these things in our heart, then we lament and we fall into hopelessness. And that is usually the hiccup with the practice of loving kindness, because if you have a warm heart, if you have this warm-heartedness, if you have loving kindness, love for another being, you have to have compassion for them and what they go through, and we want to shut off right then and there. But if you don't have the wisdom that says, yeah, compassion for the suffering, but the suffering can be avoided, the heart is vast, is infinite, and can swallow this, can take this, can handle it, can move through it, and through wisdom can let go of that suffering. We can go through that suffering. If you've ever spent any time in hospice, people can die and die letting go in profound freedom. It's possible. We like to pin our intellect on things and make them these big extremes, where it's like, I couldn't handle it if that happened. But then these things do happen. Someone cheats on us. Someone betrays us. Someone embezzles us. Someone steals from us. Someone lies to us. And it hurts. But we do get through it. We can get through it. And how much we suffer getting through it is totally dependent on how we perceive of these things. When we see these things clearly, when we have this human faculty of influence over our own views, and this divine inborn nobility, this noble heart, this goodness in our heart, what the Buddha calls a blameless heart. If you live blamelessly, if you live in a moral way, and if you live in a way if you follow the path of peace, and you find that joy is a choice, and it's an easy one when you learn how your own emotions work, when you step outside of yourself and you can be a friend to yourself and allow yourself to just be alive, a huge current of joy arises in your life, coagulates in your whole psyche from that place. And all of this, I'm hoping, is painting this picture of equanimity. Equanimity brings us to what the Buddha calls the base of no-thingness or nothingness. It's really the base of emptiness. It's not that there's nothing, it's that there's no thing. No things there. There's no sorrow, there's no pain, there's no compassion, all of these things are so fluid, all of these things are so interconnected that we arrive at a place of emptiness. Sunyata is the Pali term for this, where we see that these things are functions of our mind and heart that are not concrete, that there is a freedom from. We become what the Buddha is often attributed to saying, the translation into English is to become disenchanted. There's this disenchantment with, we look at the infinity of time and the infinity of beings that have arisen and suffered and died in war, the amount of human beauty that has been cast into this world, all the variety of wonderful things and terrible things, and we see this is just the ocean of infinite consciousness. This is how things are. It can't be avoided, and we let go. We see it as, a dramatic movie on a TV screen, and we just say, I'm not going to watch anymore. I'm just going to be in this breath, in this body, present with myself, and not believing in any particular thing, because we already know anything, any way it can be seen, it can always be seen a different way. And it's always changing and moving all along the way. The Buddha says, however people, unawakened beings, perceive of their world, the truth is always other than that. Because if we're not seeing through the eye of wisdom, then we're not seeing clearly. We're not seeing things as they truly are. A term that is said over and over again in the Pali Canon in Pali is yata bhuta jnana dasana, to see things as they really are, clearly. Clear comprehension, sampajanya, this clear understanding through wisdom, a wisdom that's developed over time, and a wisdom that is developed through these practices, the 7 enlightenment factors, the 7 factors of awakening, these infinite abodes, these infinite mind states, and probably what's of primary importance, especially, it's just this central faculty of calm abiding, of self-regulation, of self-tranquilization. I often refer to meditation as the art of self-tranquilization. Coming to a place that is first calm enough and non-reactive enough that it has the ability to make a shift in its perception. And from that shift, realizing that many shifts can take place in that perception, and from there seeing the dancing illusion of what our existence really is. And then there's that disenchantment where we go, oh, this isn't to be taken so literally. It's all flowing and impermanent anyways. Whatever is happening today, even Jesus' death, like poor Mary Magdalene watching her son being butchered, by the Romans. And, after a year or two, it goes away. My own mother died tragically in a plane crash, which was horrible. When I was 23, I went to the plane crash. It was buried in the forests at like 10,000 feet elevation. They couldn't even get to the wreckage. It took them 3 days to get to her and the bodies of her and her friends. And this is life. When we get really stuck on ourselves, we lament and say, "Oh, this happened to me." There's always somebody else who's like, "Yeah, well, my mother was shot in the head by Nazis," or whatever. We say, "Oh, that's not just me. This is what it is to be in this world," and we stop holding on to things. My mother was going to die someday. I'm going to die someday. I might be hurt tomorrow or lose my limbs. We have to open to this vulnerability and know that, but what I am in here is always my choice. To have this resiliency of the human heart, to be willing to face our lives and not let them influence us, but to bring our absolute best character to it, and to do it from a state of peace, a state of calm, a state of intelligence and wisdom and brilliance. I'm going to end this here. I hope to see you again soon. Please like and subscribe to find us again. You can visit our website, that's Still Rhythm Guidance, for the many offerings we have there. And hope to see you in our next episode. Take care and be well.